The playground was loud with shrieks and laughter, a chaos of voices that seemed to rise higher with every gust of spring wind. Yet on the far side, beneath the shade of a maple tree, a boy sat alone on a wooden bench. His uniform shirt was buttoned too tight at the collar. His shoelaces were double-knotted with anxious precision. He held his backpack against his chest like a shield, as though fabric and straps could make him disappear. No one noticed him. That was how he preferred it most days. If no one noticed, then no one would have the chance to point and laugh. But silence carried its own weight, and today it pressed down harder than usual. "Why are you sitting here all by yourself?" The voice was small, almost musical, but steady in a way that made the boy lift his head. Standing in front of him was a girl with her hair tied into uneven twists, sneakers dusted from the slide, and eyes the color of chestnut bark. She could not have been older than 7, yet her presence was firm. Jonah Vale stared back, his grip tightening on the backpack strap. At 7 years old, he had already practiced the art of silence. His prosthetic leg clicked when he shifted, and the sound betrayed him more than words ever could. "They don't want me there," he whispered, eyes fixed on the ground. The girl tilted her head, a frown tugging at her mouth. "Why not?" Before Jonah could answer, a burst of laughter cut across the playground. 3 boys sauntered closer, their sneakers scuffing the mulch like a threat. One carried a half-empty juice box, another dragged his heel through the dirt with deliberate menace, and the tallest narrowed his eyes at Jonah. "Well, look at this," the leader sneered. 10 boys trying to make a friend." He squinted at the girl and smirked. "And what's she?" "Oh, right, a charity case." His friends snorted, echoing cruelty like a chorus. "Perfect. The broken one and the throwaway. A pair of rejects." The girl froze, her fingers tightening at her sides. She had been teased before. Her clothes weren't new. Her voice carried the faint trace of a neighborhood the other children's parents whispered about. But the way the boys mocked Jonah lit something fierce in her chest. "That's not funny," she shot back, her small voice cracking but strong enough to make heads turn. "You don't get to talk like that." The leader chuckled, tossing his juice box so that sticky liquid splattered onto Jonah's uniform. The boy flinched, his cheeks burning as he tried to hide behind his backpack. Another bully flicked crumbs from his sandwich across the bench, letting them rain down Jonah's shirt. "Stop it!" the girl shouted. Her fists balled at her sides, her chin lifting. "You're nothing but cowards. Picking on someone because he's different doesn't make you strong. It makes you mean." The leader raised a handful of mulch as if ready to throw. "Or what, little girl? You going to fight us?" Her eyes narrowed. "Or I'll tell Mr. Gibson you were throwing food again. And my uncle works here. He knows how to make people listen." She glared, her voice sharpening like a blade. "Everyone can see what you really are. Small. Ugly." The playground quieted. Whispers spread like sparks. Children watched from the monkey bars, from the swings, from the slides, their chatter dimming under the weight of spectacle. The bullies shifted, their bravado slipping. "Whatever," the leader muttered, dropping the mulch. "This isn't over." He jerked his head, and the 3 slunk away, shoulders stiff with false swagger. Jonah sat frozen, juice soaking into his shirt, crumbs scattered across his lap. The girl turned immediately, pulling a crumpled tissue from her pocket. She dabbed gently at the stains, her hands quick, her eyes soft. "They're just stupid," she said firmly. "Don't let them make you smaller." Jonah swallowed hard. Shame ached in his chest, but her words left behind something else, something that glimmered faintly, like a spark in the dark. "Why did you do that?" His voice trembled, nearly lost to the shrieks of children racing back toward the swings. "Because it was wrong." She shrugged, then smiled, a gap showing where a tooth had been lost. "And because I think you could be my friend." The bell rang, sharp and commanding. Children rushed toward the red brick school building. Jonah stood slowly. His prosthetic knee clicked, stiff and awkward. He stumbled. Without hesitation, the girl caught his arm. "There," she said, steadying him with ease. "Better." Jonah looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in a long time, he believed her. That afternoon, the black sedan carried him away from the schoolyard, past rows of magnolias and storefronts, back toward the gated estate where his father lived like a king. The air inside smelled faintly of leather and polish, every seam perfect, every corner neat. His father, Nathaniel Vale, spoke into his phone with clipped authority, words like contracts and investors filling the silence. Jonah pressed his forehead against the window, watching the city blur. He should have been replaying the taunts, the juice soaking into his shirt, the sting of laughter. That was how afternoons usually passed. But instead, her voice lingered. Her small figure standing before 3 boys, fists clenched, calling them cowards. When the car pulled into the circular driveway, the mansion rose before him, pale stone and gleaming glass. A fountain trickled in the center, its spray catching the light. Jonah stepped out slowly, the click of his leg echoing against marble. Inside, Miriam Vale waited at the base of the grand staircase. Every strand of her auburn hair was immaculate, her smile stretched too wide. "You're late," she said, brushing invisible lint from his shoulder. Her eyes dropped to his stained shirt. "Another accident?" "No," Jonah whispered. Her brow arched. "Then why is your uniform filthy? You know your father expects you to represent this family with dignity." Nathaniel ended his call, resting a distracted hand on Jonah's shoulder before turning back to his phone. "He's fine, Miriam. Let him breathe." Miriam's lips tightened. She guided Jonah toward the dining room, where the long oak table stretched beneath a chandelier. Plates were set meticulously. Steak for Nathaniel, roasted vegetables for her, and for Jonah, a measured portion of chicken and broccoli. Jonah picked at the food in silence. His mind strayed back to the playground, back to the girl's fierce glare, back to her hand steadying him. Her voice had told him not to shrink, not to let them make him small. His fork slipped and clattered against the plate. Miriam's eyes flicked up. "Clumsy again," she murmured. "Perhaps too much therapy is exhausting you. We may need to scale it back. It isn't good for a boy like you." "I can handle it," Jonah whispered. "That's not for you to decide." Her tone was crisp, final. Nathaniel's phone buzzed again. He excused himself. Silence closed around the table, heavier than marble. Later, as Miriam tucked him into bed, she adjusted the blanket with careful precision. Her voice softened, but the edges of steel remained. "You must be careful about who you spend time with. Not everyone belongs in your world." Jonah's heart thudded. "I met someone today," he murmured. Her hands stilled. "Someone?" "A girl. She helped me." Something sharp flickered behind Miriam's smile. "That's sweet. But remember what I told you. Some children don't understand what it means to be part of this family. Best to keep your distance." Jonah wanted to argue. He wanted to say that she understood him better than anyone in that house, but her gaze pressed down on him like stone. He turned to his side, feigning sleep until the light clicked off and the door closed. In the dark, his chest ached, but the memory of the girl's voice lingered, refusing to fade. She had seen him, and in her eyes, he had not been small. The house glowed with evening light, chandeliers scattering gold across polished stone. Yet Jonah felt none of its warmth. He sat at the edge of his bed, shoes still on, his hand pressed against the prosthetic joint that throbbed with every movement. The adjustments Miriam demanded at the clinic always left him stiff, never stronger. He had learned not to complain. Complaints were dismissed, wrapped in her smile, folded into words like exaggeration or weakness. Through the half-open door came the faint sound of his father's voice, measured and commanding, echoing from the study below. Nathaniel Vale spoke of deals and deadlines, the rise and fall of numbers that determined the shape of other men's lives. Jonah had memorized that rhythm. His father's tone changed for everyone, investors, partners, reporters, but rarely for him. Miriam's footsteps clicked in the hall. Jonah quickly lay back, pulling the blanket to his chin, feigning sleep. She paused at his doorway, her shadow stretching long across the carpet. For a breath, silence hovered, and then she moved on. The quiet that followed felt heavier than her presence. The next morning came with a sky low and gray, pressing against the windows of the estate. Jonah dressed carefully, tugging his shirt straight, smoothing the collar. The driver waited in the black car outside, polished to a mirror shine. Miriam adjusted his tie before he left, her hands brisk, her smile controlled. "Remember," she murmured, "you carry our name with you. Don't let anyone forget it." At school, the playground erupted with the usual noise. Jonah stepped out of the sedan, the click of his leg louder than it should have been. The sound made him want to fold inward, but before he could retreat to his bench, a voice cut through the chatter. "Jonah, over here!" The girl from yesterday was waving near the swings, her grin wide and fearless. She darted across the yard, her backpack bouncing, sneakers scuffing dirt into clouds. "You came," she said, as though she had expected nothing else. "I saved us a seat at lunch." Jonah blinked. "You want me to sit with you?" "Of course," she replied, her tone as matter-of-fact as the sun climbing the sky. "That's what friends do." The word caught in his chest. Friend. He hadn't heard it directed at him in a long time. But by lunch, the promise fractured. Jonah carried his tray carefully, following her through the cafeteria. They had nearly reached the corner table when a foot slid out across the floor. Jonah stumbled, the tray tilting, milk spilling across his shoes in a cold splash. Laughter erupted around him. "Watch it, one leg," the tallest boy jeered, his smirk sharp. He turned to the girl. "Better let your girlfriend carry it, not that anyone would want her." His sneer lingered, cruel and deliberate. Who'd want a nobody? The cafeteria stilled. Jonah froze, shame burning hot through his face. His instinct was always to shrink, to vanish. But before the silence could harden, the girl slammed her tray down on the table, the noise cracking like thunder. "Shut up!" Her voice carried across the room. "You don't get to talk about him, or me, or anyone." Every eye turned. She trembled, but her chin lifted. "You think you're tough? You're not. You're just scared. And scared kids hurt people so they don't feel small themselves." Teachers rushed in then, scolding, dragging the boys aside. The moment broke. But Jonah couldn't stop staring. She had stood in front of everyone, trembling but unyielding, her voice slicing through cruelty like light through fog. Later, at their corner table, Jonah whispered, "Why do you keep helping me?" She looked at him as though it were the simplest question in the world. "Because it's right, and because you deserve a friend." He stared at his tray, words lodged in his throat. All he managed was a whisper. "I've never had one before." She smiled, soft but certain. "Well, you do now." The word clung to him all afternoon like a fragile flame. Friend. That evening, the ride home felt longer than usual. Jonah sat in the back, shoes damp from spilled milk, mind replaying her voice in the cafeteria. When the car stopped at the mansion, Miriam was waiting again, her posture flawless, her smile pinned in place. "You're late," she said, brushing at the faint stain on his sleeve. Her eyes narrowed. "Another accident?" "No," Jonah murmured. Her gaze sharpened. "Then why are your clothes ruined?" Nathaniel appeared from the study, phone in hand. "He's fine," he said absently, already glancing at a new message. His words carried no weight. His absence was more present than his body in the room. Dinner passed in silence. The clatter of silverware against porcelain echoed like judgment. Miriam studied Jonah with clinical precision, as though searching for flaws she could smooth away. When the meal ended, she guided him upstairs. As she pulled the blanket over him, her voice softened, but the steel remained. "You must be careful who you let close, Jonah. Not everyone belongs beside you. Some children will only drag you down." Jonah's throat tightened. He wanted to say that she was wrong. He wanted to tell her that the girl had made him feel stronger than anyone in that house ever had. But Miriam's smile, so polished it gleamed like glass, left no space for defiance. When she left, the silence returned, thick as stone. Jonah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the ache in his leg throbbing in rhythm with his pulse. He thought of her voice again, clear, fierce, telling bullies they were cowards, telling him he wasn't small. He pressed his palm against the prosthetic joint. Pain flared, sharp and insistent. But beneath it, another sensation stirred, a quiet seed of defiance. In the dark, Jonah whispered into the silence, almost as if to himself. She was right. The words hung suspended in the stillness of the room, fragile yet unbreakable. The first crack in the walls that had contained him for so long. Rain lingered in the air the next morning, a fine mist that turned the schoolyard into a blur of gray and damp. Jonah stepped out of the black car, his collar pulled high, his steps careful. The click of his prosthetic echoed against wet pavement, sharper in the stillness. He scanned the playground instinctively, searching for the shadows that had taunted him the day before. The boys lingered by the slide, their whispers low, eyes darting toward him. His stomach tightened. He braced for laughter. Then he heard her voice. "Jonah! Over here!" The girl waved from the swings, her braids damp with drizzle, her grin undimmed by the weather. She was small, yet her presence felt louder than all the noise of the yard. Jonah's chest loosened despite himself. He crossed the puddled grass, the click of his leg almost lost to the splash of shoes. She patted the swing beside her. "Sit. I want to see." He froze. "See what?" "Your leg. It clicks every time. Doesn't that bother you?" Her tone was calm, curious, not cruel. Jonah glanced around. "I don't think I should." "You don't have to," she shrugged, kicking at the dirt. "But my aunt says if something sounds wrong, it usually is. You don't have to hide it from me. I'm not scared." No one had ever said that to him. Not a teacher, not a doctor, not Miriam. Especially not Miriam. Jonah sat down cautiously, brushing water from his pants. His chest thudded as though every eye were on him, though most of the children had already run inside. "It hurts sometimes," he admitted in a whisper. "Feels too tight. But they say that's normal." The girl frowned. "Normal doesn't mean right." The bell rang before he could reply. They raced inside with the others, her words echoing in his head like a quiet drumbeat. All morning Jonah struggled to concentrate. Numbers on the board blurred, letters in his workbook tangled. He could only think of the way she'd looked at him, serious, determined, and how she had made his pain sound like something real, not weakness. When the final bell rang, he found her waiting by the gate. She tugged his sleeve before he could step toward the car. "Come on. I want you to meet someone." Jonah hesitated. He knew the driver was watching. He knew Miriam would scold him for lingering. But her eyes sparked with certainty, and he followed. They hurried down the sidewalk to the fence where a woman stood with a grocery bag in one hand. She was tall, her hair streaked silver, her cardigan worn at the elbows. Her gaze was steady, sharp, yet kind. "This is my aunt," the girl announced proudly. Aunt Lila. She knows things. Lila smiled, lines deepening around her eyes. And who is this polite young man? Jonah shifted awkwardly. Jonah Vale. Recognition flickered across her face. Vale? As in Nathaniel Vale's boy? He nodded. It always felt strange to be recognized by the weight of a name rather than by who he was. Lila crouched, meeting his eyes. Your leg, she said gently. May I see how it fits? Jonah hesitated. Adults usually told him what to accept, never asked, but her gaze held no pity, only curiosity. Slowly, he lifted the cuff of his pants. The sleek prosthetic gleamed, damp from rain. Lila adjusted her glasses, her fingers tracing the socket with practiced care. She pressed lightly at the padding, tapped the joint, tilted her head. This isn't aligned properly, she murmured. And the padding's wrong. No wonder it hurts. Jonah blinked. But they always said it's supposed to feel like that. Her expression hardened. No, child. Whoever set this up didn't do it for your comfort. Looks more like they've made adjustments to keep you dependent. The words cracked something inside him. For the first time, an adult confirmed what he had felt all along, that the pain wasn't his fault. That he wasn't weak or imagining things. Relief surged through him, tangled with anger. See? The girl piped up, tugging his sleeve. I told you. The chauffeur honked from the curb. Jonah flinched. Panic surged. I have to go, he stammered. Come by sometime, she said quickly. Aunt Lila can show you more. We don't have much, but we've got tools. Jonah wanted to say yes. He wanted to shout it, but fear rushed in, cold and suffocating. He shook his head. I can't. Her brow furrowed. Why not? Because they won't let me, he whispered. Lila laid a hand gently on his shoulder. Sometimes the people who claim to love us don't see the truth. That doesn't mean the truth isn't there. The car horn blared again. Jonah muttered a goodbye and hurried across the street, heart pounding. He felt their eyes on him the whole way. That evening the mansion glowed with lamplight, but the brightness only sharpened its emptiness. At dinner, Miriam's smile was fixed as ever, her knife gliding through roasted vegetables with mechanical grace. You're quieter than usual, she observed, her tone casual but cutting. Something happened at school? Jonah shook his head quickly. No. Her gaze narrowed. Did someone bother you? You know you can tell me. He thought of Lila's steady hands, of the way she had seen the fault lines in his prosthetic without hesitation. He thought of the girl's voice. Normal doesn't mean right. But Miriam's eyes glittered with expectation, sharp as glass. I'm fine, he whispered. Nathaniel barely looked up from his phone. See? He's fine. The conversation ended, like it always did, with silence. That night, Jonah lay awake, the blanket pulled to his chin, his leg throbbing beneath the weight of the device. He pressed his palm against the joint, remembering Lila's words. They've made adjustments to keep you dependent. Why would anyone want that? His throat tightened, his eyes burning, but beneath the fear was a flicker of something else, something stubborn. The girl's voice returned, clear as the rain against the window. Normal doesn't mean right. She had believed him. She had seen him. In the dark, Jonah whispered a promise into the silence. I'll see her again. The house was still, but the vow hung in the air like a spark waiting to catch flame. Saturday dawned with pale light slanting across the wide windows of the Vale mansion. The morning should have felt easy, but Jonah sat at the kitchen counter with untouched pancakes cooling in front of him. The smell of syrup and polish mingled in the air, sweet but suffocating. Miriam floated through the room in her silk robe, flipping a glossy magazine. Eat up, darling, she said without looking. Her tone was honeyed, but beneath it was the edge he had come to know too well. "You need your strength." Jonah stabbed at the pancake with his fork. His leg throbbed, the prosthetic rubbing raw against tender skin. Lila's words haunted him. "It isn't aligned properly. No wonder it hurts." Nathaniel swept in, already in a pressed suit, though it was only Saturday. He kissed the top of Jonah's head absently. "Big meeting downtown," he said. "We'll talk later, champ." Then he was gone, the sound of the door clicking like a lock. Miriam set down her magazine and studied Jonah. "I saw you lingering by the fence yesterday," she said softly, too softly. "That little girl, and her aunt." Jonah's stomach clenched. "They were just being nice." Her smile sharpened, polished to perfection. "People like that don't understand our world. They don't belong in it. You can't afford distractions, Jonah. Friends should be appropriate." He wanted to argue, to tell her that the girl had made the pain in his leg matter in a way no one else had. But the words stuck, heavy and dangerous. He lowered his head. "Yes, ma'am." Later that day, while Miriam was lost in a phone call, Jonah slipped into the garden. The fountain burbled, birds flicked through clipped hedges, but none of it comforted him. He pulled the small wrench from his pocket, the one the girl had pressed into his hand like a secret. Its weight grounded him. By Sunday afternoon, he had made up his mind. He told the driver he wanted to walk near the park, and the man, following Nathaniel's orders to indulge small requests, dropped him off a block away. Jonah's heart pounded as he stepped toward the rows of trailers, their siding faded, laundry lines strung between them. The air smelled of fried chicken and motor oil. He felt out of place in his polished shoes, his pressed shirt. But then he heard her voice. "Jonah!" She came running, chalk smudged across her cheek, her grin wide. She grabbed his hand without hesitation. "You came! Grandma, he's here!" Lila appeared in the doorway of a pale blue trailer, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Well, I'll be," she said warmly. "Welcome, Jonah. Come inside." The trailer was small, cramped, but alive. The air smelled of cornbread and collard greens. Photographs lined the walls, birthdays, graduations, laughter frozen in time. Jonah's chest ached at the sight. His own house had portraits too, but they were cold, staged, smiles pressed into place. "Sit down," Lila urged. "Let's take a look at that leg." Jonah perched on the worn couch, his chest tight. The girl hovered nearby, thrusting a soda can into his hand. "Here, it's the good kind, cold from the freezer." Lila crouched with a small toolbox. Her hands were firm but gentle as she loosened screws, shifted padding, adjusted angles. Jonah winced at first, but then something changed. The stiffness eased, the throbbing dulled. He took a tentative step, then another. His breath caught. "It feels better." The girl clapped her hands, beaming. "See? Told you." For the first time in months, Jonah smiled. It wasn't freedom yet, but it was the closest he had felt. The sound of tires crunching on gravel shattered the moment. Jonah's stomach dropped. Through the curtain, he glimpsed the sleek black sedan pulling up. Miriam stepped out, her heels sharp against the stones, her eyes like blades. "Jonah!" Her voice cut through the trailer walls. "What are you doing here?" He froze. The wrench in his pocket felt like fire. "They were helping me," he stammered. "Helping?" Miriam swept inside without invitation, her gaze skimming the modest space with disdain. "These people can't help you. They don't understand your needs. Your father has arranged the best specialists money can buy." She reached for his arm. "You don't belong here." The girl stepped forward, small but unyielding. "He belongs wherever he wants." "Stay out of this," Miriam snapped, her smile cracking at the edges. Lila rose, her voice calm but firm. "With all due respect, ma'am, the boy is in pain. I've seen the fittings. Something isn't right. For the first time, Miriam's mask slipped, anger flashing in her eyes. She gripped Jonah's arm harder. "We'll discuss this at home." Jonah looked back. The girl's eyes blazed, her hand reaching for his. Lila's gaze was steady, promising he wasn't imagining any of it. He wanted to stay. He wanted to shout that they were right. But fear clamped down. He lowered his head, letting himself be led out. The ride back was silent. Miriam's perfume filled the car, cloying and suffocating. At last, she spoke, her voice velvet over steel. "You will not go back there, Jonah. Do you understand? Those people are beneath you." He stared at his hands, fighting the sting of tears. The girl's words echoed louder. "He belongs wherever he wants." For the first time, Jonah wondered if Miriam was lying. That night, alone in his room, he lay awake with the wrench hidden under his pillow. His leg ached, but the adjustments Lila had made still lingered, softer, lighter. He pressed his palm against the joint, whispering into the dark. "They do know what's best. Better than you." The house was silent, but the words felt louder than any scream. Morning sunlight poured into Jonah's room, painting the walls with gold that felt colder than stone. He sat on the edge of his bed, his fingers curled around the small wrench hidden under his pillow, its edges pressed into his palm, grounding him against the silence that wrapped the mansion. Miriam had said he would never return to the trailer park. She had said it with a smile sharp enough to cut. Yet the memory of Lila's hands adjusting his prosthetic, of the girl's defiance, burned brighter than fear. The pain in his leg was still there, but dulled, eased in a way that proved the truth. It hadn't needed to hurt all along. At breakfast, Miriam studied him across the long oak table. Her lips curved in that practiced way, but her eyes lingered on the faint bruise around the socket of his prosthetic. "You're unusually quiet," she said softly. "Something on your mind?" Jonah shook his head. She set down her knife with deliberate calm. "Dr. Reynolds will see you this week. He's the best in the state. We'll have the adjustments fixed properly." His fork trembled. "It already feels better," he whispered. "Since—" Miriam's smile froze. "Since what?" He swallowed the words. If he said too much, she would know. And if she knew, she would crush it. He pressed his fork into the broccoli until it broke apart, silent. "Exactly," Miriam murmured, her voice smooth again. "You don't know what's best. That's why you have us." Nathaniel, half listening between sips of coffee and the glow of his tablet, nodded absently. "Your stepmother's right, Jonah. Trust her judgment." The boy's chest tightened. His father's words should have been a shield. Instead, they were chains. School offered little reprieve. The bullies lingered near the monkey bars, their whispers carrying. "Look, there's the tin boy," one snickered. "Maybe his girlfriend fixed him with duct tape." Their laughter followed him like shadows. But Jonah's steps were steadier. Each movement reminded him of Lila's touch, the small adjustments that had given him relief. Pain no longer consumed every stride. That small victory made their words slide past, duller than before. At recess, the girl bounded over, her braids bouncing. She pressed something into his hand, a chipped toy button shaped like a star. "For luck," she said. "Keep it with the wrench. Double the strength." He closed his fingers around it, the cool plastic warming in his palm. "Thank you." His voice cracked with the weight of it. "That's what friends do," she said simply. All afternoon the button stayed in his pocket, a secret promise he could touch whenever Miriam's warnings echoed in his head. That evening, the mansion gleamed as always, chandeliers blazing, marble floors reflecting every flicker of light. But the air was tense, brittle, as though the walls themselves sensed a storm. Jonah lingered near the doorway of his father's study. Nathaniel was bent over papers, glasses perched low, fatigue pulling at his features. Jonah's voice was small but steady. "Dad?" Nathaniel looked up, smiling faintly. "Yes, champ?" Jonah stepped inside, the click of his leg sharp in the quiet. "I wanted to tell you about school, about my leg." Nathaniel leaned back, setting aside his pen. "Go on." Words rushed out before Jonah could lose courage. "It hurts. All the time. But she helped. Lila, the girl's aunt. She fixed it, even just a little. And it felt better. I could walk better." His eyes burned. "She said it wasn't supposed to hurt this much." Nathaniel's brow furrowed. "Really? Did she say what was wrong?" Before Jonah could answer, Miriam swept in, her heels clicking like strikes of a gavel. "Nathaniel, don't listen to this nonsense. He's been spending too much time with that child. They're filling his head with foolish ideas." Nathaniel turned to her, his frown deepening. "Viv, he says he feels better. We can't ignore that." "They are amateurs," she said smoothly. "Do you want to risk his health on the word of strangers?" Jonah's throat tightened. His father's gaze wavered, pulled between their voices. "We'll look into it," Nathaniel said vaguely at last, reaching for his papers again. Miriam's eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. She touched Jonah's shoulder, her hand just a fraction too firm. "See? Nothing to worry about now. Run along to bed." Jonah stumbled from the study, his chest burning. He had spoken. He had dared. But his words had dissolved before they could take root. That night, he lay awake, the star-shaped button clenched in one hand, the wrench in the other. His room was silent but for the hum of air conditioning. He whispered into the dark, the vow trembling but fierce. "I'll find a way." The mansion loomed around him, vast and cold, but his words lingered, fragile and unyielding. The next day at school, he told the girl everything. "I tried," he said quietly under the oak tree. "I told him, but she stopped him. She always stops him." Her eyes flashed. "That's because she's scared. If you get stronger, she loses control." Jonah's chest ached. "Why would she want me weak?" "Because then you need her," she said simply. "And if you need her, she feels important." The truth of it settled heavy in his chest. He hadn't wanted to believe it, but he knew she was right. At recess, the bullies circled again. "Broken toy and his guard dog," one muttered. They tossed a wad of paper that fell short, but Jonah didn't flinch. He stood still, his fists clenched, the button and wrench pressing against his palm. For the first time, their words slid past him like wind. That afternoon, as he waited by the gate, Lila appeared with the girl. She crouched, her eyes steady. "Sweetheart, if you let me, I can show you how to walk stronger. Not just adjustments. Training. Your muscles need to work with the leg, not against it." Jonah's heart leapt, but fear clawed quickly after. "Miriam won't let me." Her hand rested lightly on his shoulder. "You have more say than you think. Don't forget that." The sedan pulled up. Miriam stepped out, her heels biting the pavement. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of them. "I thought I made myself clear," she said coldly. The girl stood in front of Jonah without hesitation. "He's our friend." Miriam's smile sharpened. "Friendship is not what he needs. What he needs is discipline." She seized Jonah's arm, steering him toward the car. Inside the sedan, her perfume thick in the air, Jonah pressed the wrench and button together in his pocket. Her voice dripped with disdain. "You will not disobey me again." He whispered so softly she could not hear. "They know what's best. Not you." The city blurred past his window, lights streaking through glass. His jaw tightened. The fight had only begun. The storm broke on a Thursday. The sky pressed low and heavy, rain streaking the windows of the school, thunder rolling like distant drums. The air smelled of wet asphalt and chalk dust, restless with energy. Jonah sat in the classroom, his pencil trembling over blank paper. He could not focus on the arithmetic problem scrawled across the board. The pain in his leg had grown again since Miriam's latest adjustments. Each step scraped like glass beneath his skin. At recess, the girl noticed the limp. "It's worse, isn't it?" she whispered. He nodded, shame thick in his throat. "Then you have to tell someone. Really tell them." Her voice carried the urgency of someone who had already decided. "If you don't, she'll keep hurting you." Jonah's chest tightened. "What if they don't believe me?" "Then make them," she said, her eyes fierce. "Don't stay quiet this time." The words echoed in his mind as the day crawled forward. By dismissal, his leg burned with every step. The rain had not let up, soaking the playground as children rushed to waiting cars and buses. Jonah lingered by the oak tree, the wrench and button heavy in his pocket. When the black sedan arrived, Miriam was not alone. Nathaniel stepped out beside her, his umbrella wide enough to shield them both. His expression was unreadable, the faint crease in his brow the only sign of unease. "Jonah," Miriam called sweetly, "come along." But before he could move, a voice carried across the wet air. "Mr. Vale!" Lila strode forward, rain plastering her silver hair to her forehead. The girl clutched her hand, unafraid. Teachers hovered nearby, drawn by the tension sparking through the air. "Your son is in pain," Lila said firmly. "His prosthetic isn't fitted correctly. I've seen it with my own eyes. He shouldn't be forced to suffer like this." Murmurs rippled among the teachers. Nathaniel stiffened, glancing at Jonah. "Is this true?" Jonah froze. Miriam's eyes sliced into him, her smile a blade. "Nonsense. He's exaggerating. You know how children are, Nathaniel." The air crackled. Jonah's heart thundered. This was the moment. He gripped the wrench and button in his pocket, grounding himself. His voice was small, but it broke through the rain. "She's lying." The world seemed to stop. Every eye turned to him. His chest heaved, his throat raw, but the words surged out, unstoppable now. "It hurts all the time. She tells me it's normal, but it's not. Lila fixed it and it felt better. But then Miriam changed it again, and now it hurts worse. She doesn't want me to get stronger." His voice cracked. "She wants me weak." Gasps rippled. Nathaniel's face paled. Miriam's mask shattered for a moment, fury flashing like lightning. "Jonah," she hissed. "Enough." But Jonah stood taller, the rain soaking his uniform, his hair plastered to his forehead. "You don't listen to me. You don't want me to get better. You just want control." Silence fell heavy. Even the thunder seemed to hold its breath. Nathaniel's gaze flicked between his son and Miriam. For once, the calculations in his eyes faltered. "Is this true?" he demanded, his voice low, dangerous. Miriam's smile snapped back into place, brittle. "Of course not. He's confused. Children imagine things." "He's not imagining it," Lila said sharply. "I've been working with prosthetics for 30 years. I know what I saw. This boy has been forced into pain that could have been eased." The teachers nodded, whispers spreading like wildfire. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He looked at Jonah again, really looked, as though seeing him for the first time. His son's shoulders hunched with fear, but his eyes blazed with something stronger. "I believe him," Nathaniel said quietly. The words sliced the air. Miriam flinched, her lips parting in shock. The girl stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. "He's braver than you think. He just needed someone to listen." Jonah's throat burned, his chest heaving with the weight of everything unleashed. But even as relief washed through him, fear clung tight. Miriam's eyes had darkened, a storm contained behind glass. He knew this battle wasn't over. The teachers ushered them inside, voices low, urgent. Nathaniel followed, his hand on Jonah's shoulder, protective for the first time in memory. Miriam trailed behind, her silence more dangerous than her words. That night, the mansion was quieter than ever. Jonah sat on his bed, the button in one hand, the wrench in the other. The confrontation replayed in his mind, his words spilling into the rain, his father's declaration of belief, Miriam's mask cracking. But the silence that followed was not victory. It was a pause, a waiting. He could feel it in the air, in the weight of Miriam's gaze at dinner, in the way her fork scraped porcelain too sharply. As he lay in bed, Jonah whispered into the dark, "I spoke." His chest ached, but beneath the ache was a flicker of strength. Yet even as sleep tugged at him, he sensed it. Miriam would not let go easily. The storm had only shifted. The real reckoning was yet to come. The days after the storm blurred into uneasy quiet. At school, Jonah walked straighter, steadier. Lila adjusted the prosthetic again, showing him how to move with balance, how to let his muscles guide the rhythm rather than fight against it. The girl cheered at every step, her laughter spilling across the playground like sunlight breaking cloud. The bullies watched from a distance now, their jeers muted. Jonah no longer flinched when they muttered. He no longer shrank when they looked his way. Each stride reminded him he was not small, not broken, not powerless. But at home, the air had turned brittle. Miriam smiled as always, her voice honeyed, her touch light. Yet her eyes followed Jonah like shadows. At dinner, her words dripped with sweetness that masked steel. "We're so proud of you, darling," she said one night, buttering bread with precision. "Everyone says you're improving, but improvement requires discipline. Without it, everything crumbles." Jonah kept his gaze on his plate, the button and wrench tucked safe in his pocket. His father praised him absently, distracted by glowing screens, but his presence offered a shield, thin, fragile, but a shield nonetheless. The confrontation came on a Sunday. Nathaniel had gone into the city for a meeting, leaving the mansion hushed and echoing. Rain streaked the windows again, a whisper of the storm that had passed. Miriam called Jonah into the parlor, where the fire burned low in the marble hearth. She stood by the mantel, her silk dress gleaming, her hands clasped as though in prayer. Her smile was almost tender. "Jonah," she began softly, "I know you've been upset with me. I know you think I've been unfair, but everything I've done is for you, to protect you, to shape you into someone strong." Jonah said nothing. His fingers curled around the button in his pocket, the edges pressing into his palm. Miriam stepped closer, her eyes glinting. "You don't understand now, but you will. Without me, you'll fall apart. Your father is too distracted. That girl, her aunt, they'll leave you behind. I'm the only one who can keep you safe." Her voice dropped lower, coaxing, intimate. "All you have to do is trust me again. Tell them you exaggerated. Tell them you were confused. Do that, and everything will be right again." Jonah's chest tightened. Fear rose like a tide, thick and suffocating. But beneath it, another voice echoed. The girl's fierce certainty, Lila's calm truth, his father's first words of belief. "You don't have to stay quiet. You have more say than you think." "I'm not confused," he said, his voice trembling but clear. "You hurt me. You wanted me weak. I won't say otherwise." The fire crackled, filling the silence. Miriam's smile faltered. For the first time, her mask cracked entirely. Fury flashed raw in her eyes. "You ungrateful child," she hissed. "Everything I've done for you, and this is how you repay me? Do you think they'll care for you more than I have? You're nothing without me." Jonah's hand tightened around the button. His other hand pressed against the wrench, its weight grounding him. "I'm not nothing," he whispered. Then louder, steady despite the quake in his knees. "I'm not yours to control." Her breath caught, rage burning through her polished facade. She reached as if to seize his arm, but Jonah stepped back, the click of his leg firm, unyielding. For the first time, he stood without flinching. Footsteps echoed in the hall. Nathaniel entered, his coat damp from rain, his eyes narrowing at the sight before him. "What's going on?" Jonah turned, his voice urgent. "She told me to lie, to say I was wrong. But I wasn't." His chest heaved. "She hurt me, Dad. She wanted me weak." Miriam spun, her voice dripping with desperation. "Nathaniel, he's confused, manipulated. That woman and her niece have twisted his mind. Don't let them tear this family apart." But Nathaniel's gaze had shifted. He saw Jonah standing tall, his son's eyes blazing with fear and truth. He saw Miriam, trembling with fury, her mask crumbling. "Enough," Nathaniel said quietly, his voice heavier than thunder. Miriam froze. "I've ignored too much for too long," he continued. "But I won't ignore this. Pack your things, Miriam. You're leaving." Her face drained of color. "You can't." "I can," he cut in, his voice final. "And I will." The silence that followed was sharp, unbearable. Miriam's eyes burned with venom as she turned on Jonah one last time. "You'll regret this," she whispered. Then she swept from the room, her heels striking the marble like gunfire. Jonah sagged, breath shaking, his legs trembling. Nathaniel knelt, his hand steady on his son's shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said, voice raw. "I should have listened sooner." Jonah clutched the button tighter, the wrench pressing against his palm. He could hardly believe it. He had spoken, defied, stood firm. And Miriam was gone. Yet even as relief washed over him, a new weight settled. He knew it wasn't finished. The way she had looked at him, fury, betrayal, promise, lingered like a storm waiting on the horizon. That night, Jonah lay awake, the rain tapping against the glass. The house felt different, lighter, yet still fragile. His father had chosen him. Miriam had been stripped of her power. But Jonah could not shake the sense that she would return, and when she did, it would not be with smiles and whispers. It would be with claws bared. He pressed the button to his chest, the wrench beside it, whispering into the dark. "I'm ready." The mansion slept. But Jonah's eyes stayed open, steady on the ceiling, waiting for the storm to break again. Morning light spilled through the tall windows, golden and sharp, as though the world itself had shifted. For the first time in years, the mansion no longer smelled of Miriam's perfume. The air felt clearer, though silence still carried her ghost. Jonah rose from bed slowly, his new prosthetic steady beneath him. He dressed himself without help, fastening buttons with clumsy fingers that grew steadier by the day. He slipped the toy wrench and the star-shaped button into his pocket. His talismans, his proof that he was no longer invisible. At breakfast, Nathaniel set his phone aside, his eyes fixed on his son. "How do you feel?" he asked. Jonah swallowed the last bite of toast. "Like I'm not broken anymore." His father's eyes softened. "You never were." The words landed heavy, healing something Jonah hadn't known could heal. Schoolyard voices greeted him later, alive with spring. Children shouted, swung, chased. The bullies hovered, but quieter now, their sneers dulled. When Jonah walked past, his stride sure, they did not move to block him. One muttered something under his breath, but the others ignored it. At the swings, Clara waved wildly, her grin bright enough to split the grayest sky. "You came!" she shouted. "I was worried your dad would keep you home." He wanted me here, Jonah said. He believes me now. Clara jumped from the swing and landed hard, wobbling before steadying herself. Good. Then you're ready. For what? Jonah asked. She pulled a crumpled flyer from her backpack. The school's fun run. A charity event. Nothing grand. But her eyes gleamed as though it were destiny itself. We should do this, she said. Both of us. Together. Jonah froze. A run. The word alone tightened his chest. He had dreamed of it, but dreams and daylight were different things. I can't, he whispered. You can, Clara said simply. You walked when they said you couldn't. You stood when they tried to push you down. You spoke when they wanted you silent. Running is just the next step. Her certainty wrapped around him like armor. He wanted to believe. He wanted to see himself the way she saw him. That evening, Jonah told Nathaniel about the run. His father hesitated, concern flickering. It might be too soon, he began. Jonah lifted his chin. I need to try. The silence stretched, then Nathaniel nodded. Then we'll train together. And so they did. Each day after school, Jonah and Clara circled the park's cracked path, Miss Rivera watching with her sharp eyes and calm smile. Nathaniel sometimes joined, his long strides slowed to match his son's. Jonah stumbled often, sometimes falling, sometimes near tears, but each time he rose. The prosthetic grew less a burden and more a partner. His body, long forced into weakness, began to find strength. On the morning of the run, the air smelled of cut grass and blooming dogwood. The schoolyard buzzed with families, teachers, students. Jonah stood at the starting line, his heart hammering louder than the cheers. Clara bounced beside him, fearless as always. You ready? She asked. No, Jonah admitted. She grinned. Perfect. Me neither. The whistle blew. Children surged forward, laughter and shouts ringing out. Jonah stumbled at first, the prosthetic catching. He nearly stopped. But then he saw Clara's hand, reaching back, steady and sure. He caught it, and together they ran. The first lap burned his lungs. His leg ached, but not with the sharp cruelty he had once known. This pain was different. Alive. Earned. He stumbled once, the crowd gasping, but he pushed forward, teeth clenched, refusing to fall. Clara's laughter carried him, her voice bright, unshaken. Halfway through, something shifted. His stride found rhythm. His body remembered what it meant to move freely. And for the first time, he wasn't just walking, wasn't just enduring, he was running. Cheers erupted as he crossed the line with Clara, their hands still linked. Not first, not even near. But victory lived in the sound of his breath, the heat of his muscles, the fire in his chest. Nathaniel's face shone from the crowd, eyes wet, hands clapping with unrestrained pride. Miss Rivera raised her hand in salute. Children who once whispered now stared with awe. Even the bullies looked away, their silence louder than any insult. Jonah collapsed onto the grass, laughter spilling out of him like light. Clara dropped beside him, panting but grinning. See, she said. Told you. Next step. That night, the mansion felt different again. No longer heavy with judgment, no longer a place of silence and suspicion. Jonah and Nathaniel sat in the garden, fireflies flickering in the warm dark. You changed today, his father said softly. Jonah shook his head. I didn't change. I just stopped hiding. Nathaniel reached out, pulling him close. Then promise me one thing. Never let anyone make you small again. Jonah pressed the wrench and button in his hand, their edges digging into his palm. I promise. The night deepened. Somewhere beyond the hedges, the city pulsed, alive with light and noise. Jonah closed his eyes, imagining the horizon stretching wide. He saw Clara beside him, laughter sharp and defiant. He saw Miss Rivera's steady hands, Nathaniel's proud eyes. He saw himself running, not stumbling, not weak, but fast, free, unbroken. When he opened his eyes, the stars burned above him, countless and untouchable. He whispered into the quiet, "I'm ready." And though he knew Miriam's shadow had not vanished, though storms always returned, Jonah no longer feared them. He had found his strength. He had found his voice. He had found people who believed in him. The future was still unwritten, suspended and dangerous. But for the first time, it was his.